recent report has highlighted the fact that unequal access to quality education is at the heart of the country's extreme and persistent levels of inequality. Now, these inequalities also, you'd remember, were quite huge when they were raised as an issue, particularly when we were in the grips of the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's talk about this. It's not a new issue, but certainly one that continues to be of concern. We speak to Paul Esterhuizen, who's the School Days CEO. Paul, thank you so much for your time this evening. I mean, one thinks about the fact that these inequalities, we often talk about them. We're talking about them even at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. But let's talk about another issue that is of impact here that we're not seeing, and that is around how much impact this has on the escalating jobs crisis that South Africa is facing.
Yeah, Bongi, thank you for having me on the show, and good evening and greetings to all the viewers out there, wherever you find yourself, watching the show, listening to Bongi, listening to Iman, and wanting to find some hope. We're talking about this evening a broken education system, and the realities are that it actually perpetuates what we're having with high unemployment, and we're saying, well, how do we fix this? Where do we go? For me, true legacy lives on. It's got to be real and it's got to live on. And one of the recent research reports that has been published by the Oppenheimer Memorial Trust. The Oppenheimer Memorial Trust was set up back in 1957 when the late Ernest Oppenheimer passed away, and his son Harry, realizing how significant this country had been, wanted to set up something that has the legacy. So they created the Oppenheimer Memorial Trust with a wonderful donation of £1 million back in 1958. And the Oppenheimer Memorial Trust still exists. So here's a report published in August, which takes a deep look at wanting to understand holistically for all of us as South Africans, because education is the heartbeat of who we are. We all know, wherever you're sitting right now, you can look to the side of you and you can know that your family is involved in education, and you've got children and you're wanting the best for them, and you're wanting to have them well educated so that they can be citizens of this country that can earn, deliver, have the right moral integrity, and make this country thrive. So I know we've come out of this incredible victory, and hopefully we're going to have another one on the cricket field soon. But this wonderful joy that we have suddenly finds ourselves in the harsh reality of wanting to understand what we really believe. And the Oppenheimer Memorial Trust, having put this report together, has an opening statement which says, we believe in a South Africa that is rich with possibilities, that is pulsing with opportunities, and is celebrated for the diversity and the vibrancy of our arts and culture. And obviously this flows over into the sports field. And this report that they've put together, for me, is so succinct and real because it looks at the key challenges that we have in our education system, and then comes out with the understanding that we've got problems. Yeah. And these problems are they're not in isolation. They're across all levels, from early childhood education to our basic education system and right through to tertiary education. We're challenged on many fronts. I'm just running ahead here, Bongi, because in my heart is around how do we cope with the school days of our children's lives.
And I suppose one of the things as well as you talk about this, because it's not only, the issue of the curriculum, the issue of some of the resources, but there is the serious reality right now. I mean, just a few weeks ago, we were honoring our teachers here on the show. And we think about the fact that they're going to be retiring quite soon. They may have played a role in who we've become, but we now need to attract younger people, skilled people who are going to be taking the baton forward. How do we begin to attract these kinds of skill set, to be in the classroom, to take the baton forward?
Well, when we have this overarching statement that we have a broken education system, and the three stepping stones, as it were, into my work career start with my early childhood development. And if 80% of our children in this country under the age of 5 do not have access to quality education to prepare them for grade 1, how in the world are we ever going to have this working for us, where we get into grade 1 and we end up matriculating? I saw stats this morning released by the Department of Basic Education where the matric class of 2023, who were grade 1s in 2012, there were 1.2 million children in grade 1 in 2012. We now have, writing matric in our schools, no less than 720 odd thousand, which means 400,000 children who entered grade 1 with parents hoping and aspiring to get them through to matric so that they could go to university, they could get further education. 400,000 of them have gone missing. For whatever reasons, they're not writing the matric. And that then talks to immediacy of, we need to fix early childhood. And where are the grade 1s of 1994? We're 30 years on. And are we fixing this? Are we addressing it? Are we going to be talking about this again in 1 year's time about what we're not doing? And so where's the seed of hope? So the Oppenheimer Memorial Trust then literally comes to it and says, let's hit this nail on the head. Because if we cannot solve and cannot afford, we cannot afford to get another generation lost, how do we get involved? How do we get to the forefront of this and collaborate? And how do we have opportunities for intervention that we extend across this country? Our school days mantra is, how do we get parents in communities? And that's grandparents, parents, childminders. How do we get our communities embraced around our schools to keep the teachers teaching, to make this a career that they want, not a default, I opted to study education because my marks were not good enough anywhere else.
Yeah.
And the challenge we have is if we don't get these grade 1s, if we don't get these early childhood development sector realities right, and we don't get the children stepping into grade 1 ready to learn, they're going to carry that deficiency with them right through their school years.
Yeah.
And if they get to matric, they're not going to have the capabilities of being able to get a very good matric with an ability to go to university and cope. Because so many of our matriculants manage to sneak into university, and the universities have their own issues, but they're dealing with the failure of the basic education system to provide them with, call it the material, but call it the students who are going to come into the forefront of this.
Yeah.
So deep breath. We're struggling.
Pardon me, Paul, for coming in there. I'm told we're out of time, but next time we speak, I do hope we deep dive into this, because we are going to, at the end of the matric results, be listening to the technical briefing that is going to be telling us about what you're talking about, which is the grade 1s that would have started but simply dropped out during the course of their school years and not getting to grade 12. How do we deal with this once and for all? But I do hope we get to have this conversation again. Do appreciate your time. That is Paul Esterhuizen, who's a school days CEO, and we're talking about this issue of the education system.